We'll start the meeting. Welcome everyone to the virtual meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee, which is being recorded and aired as a live broadcast. So I'll begin in the usual way by taking a roll call of everyone. If you could just unmute yourself and say you're here, that'll be fine. So forgive me. Okay, so in no particular order, Councillor Shahab Patel.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Clark.
I'm present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Donovan.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Sham Islam.
I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Syra Jamil.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sadiq Kothia. Councillor Sadiq Kothia. Okay. Councillor Anne Sachs.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Dev Sharma.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Ryan, who's replacing Councillor Paul Canal.
Correct. Thank you.
And Councillor Mohammed Javid, who's replacing Councillor Shamshir Ali.
I might as well become a permanent member of
Yes,
your
I know. We'll keep a permanent seat for you, Councillor Mohammed.
Yeah.
Councillor Javid. If someone could try and get hold of Sadiq Kothia, if someone could do that, I'd be grateful.
Chair, I've just messaged him just to make sure that he's aware of the meeting. I'm sure he is.
Thank you, Shahab. So if required, I've mentioned the raised hand feature, but if required, a 10-minute break may be scheduled at 8:32 for those who will want to take a break regarding Ramadan, and we will resume the meeting at 8:42. But could you remain in the meeting with your videos switched off and your microphones muted, as the recording cannot be paused? So don't leave the meeting. Councillor Shahab Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Can we, for convenience sake, just round it off to 8:45, if that's okay?
What, 10-minute break? Yeah, what's from 8:32 to 8:45? Yeah. Actually, that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm happy with that. If everyone else is happy with that, we'll go with that. Declarations of interest. I'm required to remind all members to declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest they or their spouse or partner may have in any matter that is to be considered at this meeting. Item number 3, report of the previous meeting held on the 30th of March 2021, pages 1 to 5. Are there any corrections, or can we agree the minutes as a true record? I take it that's agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Public participation. There are no registered speakers, so we can move to the next item. So item number 5, it's the scrutiny report on complaints performance communities directorate. I believe.
Excuse me, Chair. Councillor Patel wishes to speak.
Sorry. Thank you, Gilly. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gilly. Just to make you aware, Councillor Kothia is having trouble logging on. He's trying, but that's the reason why he's not attended the meeting so far.
Thanks, Shahab. Councillor Ryan, you got your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, please, Chair. And I'm Mrs. Ryan, don't forget, or Joyce, or Fred. Never
Give me, Councillor Mrs. Ryan, or Joyce.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
My thing about the complaints is not on what they're all about, but I wish people would put numbers. If you're going to have a statistics, if I want to know what 27% of 379 is, I don't actually want to have to work it out. Most organisations now that I'm at outside the council, and even certain, most of the committees I'm on inside the council, they put the figure that you actually see the figure of what percent, what number it is out of, so you don't have to work it out. And I do think that makes life a lot easier. And that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ryan. Maybe is that a takeaway for maybe a future report?
Yes.
If that's possible, but I want to call on Emran Sehgal, who's the Operational Director, Digital and Customers, and Anita Pilau, apologies if I have the pronunciation of your names wrong, Complaints and Insight Manager to present this report. Is that okay? Emran.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I noted Councillor Coombe had her hand up. I don't know, Councillor, if you, for you, obviously, Chair, but if you wanted to say anything prior to me talking through.
Helen,
Thank you.
so go ahead.
Thanks. I was just going to say that actually I take Councillor Mrs Ryan's point, but I think that if you look again, it does actually also not only just give a percentage, but it gives the numbers out of whatever number.
But not everywhere.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emran.
Thank you, Chair. So as many of you will know, that we committed well over a year ago to come through scrutiny with regards to our performance across complaints across the respective areas around communities, that is now communities, so that's customers digital, that's housing, that's civic pride, and that's regeneration and culture. The report goes into some contextual detail in terms of the overall performance at this point in time. When we came last to scrutiny, we talked through the recovery period in terms of, as we were in the midst of a pandemic, a decision was taken by the council to hold off on responding to complaints within the statutory timelines that we've set ourselves across the different range of complaints, from housing to civic pride, etc. We reinstated that at a point in the autumn. Naturally, we were dealing with what was a fairly extensive backlog in the way of complaints. In the majority of cases, we've cleared those backlogs of complaints across the board. Naturally, with services such as housing and with civic pride, we receive a huge volume of complaints, by far the most number of complaints across the council, and that is more, if I put it into context, in terms of the sheer volume of services that are covered off across civic pride, and with housing, the number of areas again that we cover off in housing. At the time in the autumn, I spoke about putting in improvement plans in place so that we could ensure that we're getting our performance to where it needs to be as an authority, where we are on top of our complaints, and performance is in the region of what we set ourselves corporately at a 95% level in terms of service level. So the report goes through some detail around all four respective areas. The two areas that I'll draw on are civic pride. So we have gone through a period of working with the teams in civic pride to get the model around responding to not just the backlog, but to the ongoing deluge of complaints and inquiries that we receive on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. If you look at the reports and we go through the report, you will see the upturn in performance over the course of the last 2 months prior to the end of the financial year. So February and March, we saw a real upturn in the performance, and that was an output. That was a direct output of the work that the corporate team, alongside civic pride and the operational director Josie Falco and her team, working together to bring that improvement that we've seen in that area. The same work is ongoing within housing, so we're seeing the same process being followed in terms of improvement and intervention work to ensure that the directorate is really focused on clearing those complaints, and not just clearing the complaints, but then putting in the right interventions to ensure that we on an ongoing basis are keeping on top of those complaints as they come through. That work so far has been really encouraging, and I am positive that we will start to see an upturn in the complaints performance that we currently have in housing. I don't know, Neitha, if you want to say any more on that.
Just to add that you know, there was two priorities there in terms of, you know, the clearing the backlog from when we resumed work, which was a significant piece of work that we needed to get through for both civic pride and housing. We've now brought the numbers down to a manageable number per caseworker. So going forward, we are looking to kind of ensure that we are hitting the target of 90 and above 95% in terms of complaints performance across communities. That's all.
So I'll stop there, Chair. I could go on and into the detail, but I'm sure we can get into that through questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Emma, and thank you, Anita. Members, any questions? I also have other cabinet members here, so I'll invite questions, and then maybe cabinet members for housing and civic pride can come in. So I've got Councillor Mohammed Javid to start.
Thank you, Chair. General question from both Anita and Emran. Could you please have a definition of complaints? Because sometimes, from my experience, we, for example, councillor just writes in as a query and it's recorded as a complaint. Is this still the case, both with members and with the residents, or is it genuine complaints that we're talking about?
So I mean, we have an expression that we use in our complaints policy around what constitutes a complaint. Inquiries from members are not usually recorded as complaints. We record them as member inquiries, unless, of course, the member is making a formal complaint on behalf of their constituent, then that will be recorded as a formal complaint. I mean, we are trying to move away from registering everything that comes through as complaints. The streamlining work that we've been doing enables us to kind of carry out initial assessments for everything that comes through into the iCasework system to identify what's a service request, where can we deal with and resolve issues quickly by speaking to the customer or resident, and dealing with as many cases as possible informally, rather than push them into the formal process of 10 working days or 20 working days. So
thank you. So it would be fair to say that what we see in the report are the genuine complaints.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Javid. Any other members? No. Does any of the cabinet members want to add anything? Councillor Solanki on housing.
I think Councillor Hay, you're on mute.
I just realised I'm talking to myself again. Councillor Solanki, thank you. Do you want to add any comments relevant to your portfolio to this report?
Thank you. I would just like to say, obviously, we realise that we've got a while to go, or a long way to go to hit our targets. But we, hope to see improvements. I think we're working in the background, as Emma and Anita have already said, trying to review the processes to ensure that, people aren't effectively and efficiently working on those complaints. And there's, the right amount of people working on those complaints as well across the board. We're having several meetings. I'm sure I know the operational director of housing, Carol, who invested on the call as well, who's been working closely with Emma and Anita about how we can actually move forward on making these changes. But yeah, I think we are moving in the right direction, and hopefully those numbers will be coming down soon.
Thank you, Councillor Solanki. Councillor Sharad Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Emran and Anita and Venetia. Do you have some sort of like a time frame in mind as to when you think you possibly might be in a position to have, you know, to be on top of the situation. Perhaps we can revisit and get some sort of update in the future meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've committed to coming into to Scrutiny. I think we're back here in October, I think it is, to provide that update, and you know, confident that by the time we hit there, we'll get to the heights and the standards that have been set in the other areas across communities or places it was. So you know, in Matthew Essex's area, for example, you know, they've come on that journey and they are consistently now hitting those targets as we set corporately. So confident that that we'll get there. If I look at Civic Pride and the journey that they've been on, we're talking about a 3-month turnaround. I'm fairly confident with housing that we will see a turnaround, you know, within the next couple of months.
Chair, if I could just follow up, that's great. If we can incorporate that in future meetings, you know, as an ongoing report until we get to the level that's required, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, is it perhaps is quarterly a good you know, a good time frame to come back for updates? I take it.
Sounds
so, yeah.
good, sir.
So, okay. Councillor Helen Coombe, you've got your hand up. You got a question?
Yes, I was just going to say.
Go on.
To agree with that, and that, you know, that is in our forward plan to do anyway. So we're appearing at every committee in this cycle with this complaints report relating to their committees. So we'll do the same again in October.
Thank you. I was going to ask, I mean, it depends, I suppose it's pertinent to each portfolio, but are there any some of the complaints, do they suggest potentially wider problems, or is some of the problems that come up, can we anticipate the problems because we're getting similar types of complaints? I don't know if that has to be directed to the portfolio holder. Councillor Solanke, is that something that we can pick up from the complaints pertinent to housing? You're on mute. Sorry,
Joe. Sorry, Councillor Hare. Was that in terms of the complaints?
Yeah. So, are there common themes coming up on complaints? And is it something that we can anticipate? I don't know. Maybe it's unfair. Emran, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are themes that we're seeing. So there's the insights work that goes on in the background, which is really understanding why people are feeling the need to complain. Looking at some of that insight, obviously it's going to differ for each respective area. Some of it will be consistent in. So if I use an example around housing, it may well be that that we've there's been some form of delay in communicating someone's points that they may have queried, or they're unhappy with a decision, and there's a range of reasons behind that we can have a look at, and that's the type of insight that you then, you know, as a team, we're taking back into housing, for example, and we're working with those service areas to really look at, well, how can we get around that? How can we, you know, improve that customer experience, improve the journey up front, so that people don't find themselves in a position where they haven't had the right information provided to them. And it's those types of complaints that I think we can take out of the system. There are always going to be complaints there that where people are unhappy with decisions, and you know, more formal decisions where we followed a statutory process. We have very little room for manoeuvre, and people will feel and want to complain about that, and we have to deal with them, you know, on a case-by-case basis. But your point around insight, I mean, that was an example in housing, but there are examples across the board that we publish on a month-to-month basis. So there's an insight report that is produced. It's on the intranet. It's done on a monthly cycle, and it hones in on some of those underlying root causes and talks about some of the interventions that we are putting in place to eradicate that. So I can send a link via Gilly to send on to yourselves, but it is on the intranet, and it's worth a read.
Yes, thank you. That would be good. Thanks, Emran. So before I invite other members back, so occasionally there might be some training needs depending on some of the outcomes that come out, or some of the problems that you may need to, staff may need to be retrained or trained in certain occasions. I take it that would happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be training needs. There may well be processes that we need to look at, our own internal processes, a range of different things. But yeah, absolutely. Those are the types of root causes that we then take back into the service area and have those conversations to put the interventions in place.
Thanks, Emran. Councillor Shah Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, is this particular situation related or has a bearing, do you think, on this particular year, the COVID year, or has this been building up over the years and it's come to a crescendo at the moment? Just trying to understand the situation, because you did mention, Emran, about David Essex's area, for example, being on top of the situation with complaints, etc. But I'm just wondering, I mean, has it got a bearing because of, the remote working officers are having to do at the moment, etc. Does that have a strain on the situation? Thank you.
I think in terms of trend, I think we had, because we stopped responding and there was a decision because we had staff redeployed to other areas of the council, complaints were being monitored and assessed in terms of priority. So we were looking at them, but council officers were working not within the 10-day turnaround. There wasn't a time limit put on those complaints. So there was a backlog, and I think that backlog has really, kind of built up over the course of the back end of the last calendar year. We've been able to clear that. Obviously, when we're talking about services like civic pride and housing, they are, two areas in the council where we receive, due to the sheer size of those service areas, the volume of complaints come through into those areas, and it's no different year on year. I don't think we've seen an upsurge in complaint volumes. It's just a matter of officers getting back into a rhythm of clearing backlogs and then dealing with what's in front of them on a week-to-week basis. But then also a point made around insight for us to really then start to focus in on insight. So what are these complaints telling us? And it'll be interesting as we go through the next couple of months, certainly with the team, the corporate team, which are currently doing a piece of work which is looking at, what in the way of complaints, have the reasons behind those complaints changed, over the course of the last 12 months to really give us a view on the impact of COVID. But we'll be looking at that, and you can expect that in the report that we'll put through in October.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Mrs. Ryan.
Yeah, my apologies, because I only got these documents about half an hour before the meeting and I read something incorrectly in one section, and I think the figures are all there. So my apologies, and I'm very grateful that you've done it for everything. So I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's fine.
Now I'll find my hand and put it down and mute myself again.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Ryan. Any other questions from members? Okay.
Yeah, me.
Oh, Councillor Mohammed Javid. Go on.
Well, thank you, Chair. Could I first of all say that
Are you on mute, Councillor Javid?
listen to myself, it sounded all right.
I can hear. We can hear you now. Go on.
Yeah, but I can say that housing is a very difficult and yet very important service area. It affects people's lives. It's important that we get it right. whilst we accept that there are mitigating circumstances such as the COVID, now we are hopefully beginning to come out. We need to actually have a cabinet member shared with us that we've got a new director, and the cabinet member is new, and they would have had an opportunity to assess the situation. And my view is that, I don't know what the committee feels, that we shouldn't wait for October to get an update. It's an important service area, that we should be informed earlier what is happening, what they found, what they're doing, how has it improved, you know, rather than waiting 3-4 months.
My only comment on that is that you've got to take into account the summer holidays, August, which really cuts a month out. So where are we now? May, our next meeting's July, and then we then go into the autumn. So really, it will be September, October before this can come back. Realistically,
sorry to interrupt you. Could we not have an interim report in July to say that the officers have had a look at it, and this is what we are doing? We put in place an action plan and see if it's working or not.
Emran's got his hand up, so Emran, do you want to come in?
All right, I'll let Emran do it.
I think, thank you. What I think Councillor Coombe was going to say was the fact that we, in that monthly insight reports, we produce all of that data, so you'll be able to see the trend in terms of whether or not there is an improvement or not. I will say you're able to see that on a day-to-day basis as well. We have a council dashboard which looks at complaints, members' inquiries, freedom of information requests, that is openly available. It's on the intranet as well. It's a live dashboard updated 3 times a day, just in case we were really eager to see our performance. But it's I mean, it's there for that explicit purpose to kind of continually monitor and track our performance as an organisation. So that's you know, that we're not waiting those 2 or 3 month gaps before we get a report that's produced. It changes on a week-to-week basis. It's really important that we stay on top of it, and all of the directorates have really responded well to that. So the transparency in the numbers are there, and you'll be able to see the not just the insight reports on a month-to-month basis, but also the dashboard on a day-to-day basis. And again, Chair, I'm happy to send the links out with to access that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Javed. Thank you, Emran. Yes, if you can do that, perhaps if we could add it in the, I don't know, the minutes of the meeting as well for this meeting. That if not the link, that details of where we can access that as well, so members can look at that as well. Councillor Dev Sharma.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question, I suppose it's for Emran or maybe Anita. The number of upheld and partially upheld complaints seems to be on the high side. Could this area have been impacted by the pandemic? That's the question. Thank you.
Are we so complaints for housing compared to the last 6 months that we reported to Scrutiny, the number of upheld complaints has decreased compared to the first 6 months that we've reported to Scrutiny for housing. So there's been an improvement. It's not down to, I wouldn't say it's down to COVID. I mean, the reason why we uphold a complaint is because there's been some form of injustice that we've discovered as a result of an investigation into a complaint, and whether that be around the service provision or whether that be around the time factor in terms of delay, not just to deal with their complaint, but in terms of providing them with the service that they require around housing needs. So we have seen an overall improvement in numbers and performance and the number of complaints that have been upheld for housing compared to the previous period. So
I'm looking. Can I say I'm looking at Appendix 2 on page 10, which gives details about the upheld and partially upheld complaints. 29% upheld and 21% partially upheld. I'm not quite sure what they relate to.
So that's civic pride complaints. So overall complaints that were actually responded to, of which 29% were fully upheld and 21% of the complaints were partially or partly upheld. It wasn't completely upheld in terms of the issue of the complaint, but there was some minor faults found, so therefore it's recorded as a partly upheld complaint. But overall, nearly 50% of the complaints we investigated were not upheld.
But particularly that area, are you satisfied with that kind of performance?
See the outcome of the complaint. Yes, it all depends on what the corrective actions are from the complaint. So most of the time, related to civic pride complaints, you know, we know that it's around miscollections, whether that be garden waste, refuge, recycling, so in terms of are we happy? No. We need to understand whether there's a wider issue around, you know, cleansing services and what can we do to try and eradicate the number of complaints that we receive around those services. But you know, we've had the wheelie bin rollout recently, and again, there's been a number of dissatisfaction that's been expressed around the wheelie bins. So, you know, it's all around, you know, have we applied the policy correctly? Have we followed process? Have we communicated with the resident? And if the answers to all of those questions are yes, then the complaints aren't upheld. We have had a difficult year with delays, especially around complaints this year, due to suspension, etc. So the dissatisfaction has probably increased in terms of overall satisfaction around services, but we're looking to kind of improve and embed that within the improvement plan going forward.
Yes, so there's only so much detail you can put in these. So my difficulty is that, you know, I wasn't too sure what it related to. You know, missed collection is quite kind of understandable, you know, during the pandemic, you know, lots of waste collections were delayed or missed. So that information, I didn't have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Deb. Councillor, Cabinet Member, Councillor Blackman, you've got your hand up. Councillor Blackman.
Sorry, I was just juggling between windows I had open then. Yeah, I just wanted to add on that really that you know, in terms of, I don't know the detailed breakdown of all of those civic pride complaints, but we are going through quite a significant service change with the rollout of the wheelie bins. So I think we really need to see that in proportion to that. I can't remember the latest numbers. I think it's something like 85,000 households are having the way their waste is collected change. So that's a huge number really. And I think it'd be quite interesting to see, probably that would be more reflected in the next quarter report to see what the numbers are there. But I think, yeah, we need to put them in perspective and that as a proportion. Obviously, any complaint is too many, but at the same time, you know, with a change that big, we are going to get a few, and that's to be expected, really.
Thank you, Joe. Anita, did you want to come back in? You had your hand up? Or?
I did, yes. I just wanted to say around the wheelie bin complaints, we're trying to actually, there's been a lot of work that's gone into trying to resolve wheelie bin complaints from the outset. So not putting them into the formal process of a stage 1 or a stage 2. The frequently asked questions, you know, what are people's concerns? Can we speak to people? And so there's a little bit of a team going on that are managing the contact that we're receiving from customers around the wheelie bin concerns and questions and issues that they are raising. So we're trying not to or to minimise the number of complaints going into the formal process around wheelie bins. So the numbers in the next report may not reflect a high number of complaints, purely because we're trying to resolve those sorts of complaints at first point of contact.
Thank you, Anita. Councillor Sharad Patel, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just following on from Councillor Sharma's earlier question, my question's related to the partially upheld complaints. I'm just trying to understand, is that a temporary issue at the moment, or are we likely to see partially upheld complaints as an ongoing situation?
So partially, the outcome partially upheld was introduced as part of the Ombudsman's good practice around, you know, when we're dealing with a complaint, you know, there could be various elements to a complaint, and if we uphold all of them, then obviously the complaint is fully upheld. If there's 10 particular issues raised by the complainant and only 3 were upheld, overall the complaint would be categorised as a partially upheld complaint, because the majority were not upheld and there were 2 or 3 elements to the complaint that we needed to learn from or improve. So it's kind of, we have embedded it within our process as a permanent fixture in terms of an outcome of a complaint, but there are learnings to take from that as well as the upheld complaints.
So how would you measure the success of that complaint, the success of dealing with that sort of complaint? Like, for example, if there were 5 issues and 2 or 3 were resolved, and or say 50% was resolved, I mean, how do you measure the success rate of that?
So within our corporate system, we have the functionality to capture corrective actions as a result of closing a complaint. So when a complaint has been completed, it's not fully closed until we actually carry out the remedial or agreed actions as a result of a complaint. So those actions are individually captured within the system to say the council have agreed to take X, Y, Z action as a result of this complaint, and then we can report on that to show how many corrective actions there were related to civic pride type complaints, what were they specifically around, and so on and so forth. So there is a mechanism to do that within the system, which we need to utilise a bit more, which is all part of the improvement plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Shoaib. Any other questions from members? Okay, so can we all agree to note the report? I think there was the recommendation that we'd have a quarterly update, notwithstanding the insight updates, which we can access at any time in the autumn. We'll, after the meeting, we'll put that on the agenda for a meeting in the autumn. So if you all agree, we confirm that's all agreed, you can raise your hands. That's fine. Thank you very much.
You're on mute,
I've muted
Chair.
myself. Sorry. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Anita, for presenting the report tonight. It's appreciated. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now move on to the next item, which is the Highways and Transport Task and Finish Group. So this report sets out the findings and 20 recommendations of the Task and Finish Group for approval by the committee and referral to Cabinet. So Councillor Martin Sachs, who's the chair or was the chair of the Task and Finish Group, will be presenting the report tonight. And so I ask Martin, over to you. Thank you. You're on mute, Martin.
Martin, you're on mute.
Right, I think I'm now unmuted. Thank you for inviting me to present the report. I'll try and get through the main findings of the report quickly so that you can all have an opportunity to ask questions. Okay, so starting with the introduction I wrote for the report, I pointed out that highways and transportation is a unique service affecting every citizen of the borough, and our duty as a Task and Finish group was to look at current highways and transportation service delivery in the borough. I want to thank the members of the Task and Finish group, and I see 3 of you here tonight, for your enthusiastic and good humour in your approach to developing the report. And I'd also like to thank the Highways and Transportation officers, Steve Gray, Matt Gray, Rogan Keown, for the very extensive technical advice that they gave to us. And also we seem to have gone through a lot of scrutiny officers, Elliot Flipman, Alex Murphy, Will Massett, Calbinder Benning, and Michael Edley. So, and we also had support from Councillor Howard as the previous cabinet member, and Councillor Blackman as the now cabinet member for this service. Okay, so what did we find? We looked at highways and transportation, partly in terms of the Mayor of London's transport strategy, not least because the vast majority of the capital funding for the work that we do is channeled through Transport for London. In particular, streets becoming more healthy, more active travel, transport systems to be safe and secure, spaces to be clean and green, people to travel on an expanded public transport network that is affordable, accessible, pleasant, fast and reliable, and sustainable travel to be the best option in new developments, with transport investment unlocking the delivery of new homes and jobs. Under that, we as a council have developed the Our Street strategy, which focuses on the theme of clean streets, safe streets, vibrant streets, healthy streets, attractive streets, and streets for business. And we're looking at this in terms of local neighbourhood improvements on those themes of health, green and safety. Unfortunately, COVID-19 struck literally halfway through our work, and we were effectively delayed by a complete year. So, and also we were unable to, we planned to look at sites in Redbridge and in neighbouring boroughs to enable us to look at good practice. We weren't able to do this because of COVID, but we did have presentations from officers on the lessons to be learned from a number of these schemes. We talked about a programme that was starting off. I believe it's now in abeyance because of the lack of TfL funding in the short term, the Redbridge emission neighbourhoods. And we, from our discussion on that, we came up with our first recommendation, which is to promote the development of green infrastructure, such as pocket parks and living walls, where appropriate, as a way of re-greening heavily congested, polluted and concreted areas. We also are recommending, when funding is available, continuing to develop and implement the RLNES where appropriate and following consultation, 20 miles an hour speed limit zones borough-wide, with a special focus on areas close to schools. And I must emphasise the commitments in that recommendation to consultation. And in fact, the next recommendation is on the issue of consultation, that we formalise our consultation principles, including timescales, accessibility, and making sure that all interested stakeholders are brought into the process. This is to ensure that the process is robust and provides residents with full input into measures affecting their neighbourhoods. And a second part of that recommendation, 3B, to consider the use of the commonplace heat mapping tool to provide a greater depth of information for interactivity with residents. For those not in the know, that's a system whereby people access the consultation on their laptops and essentially comments interactively with whatever other residents have put into it. We talked about Vision Zero, which is the elimination of deaths and serious injuries from our transport networks. This is a principle that TfL is now committed to, and we are doing the same in Redbridge to reduce danger and deliver evidence-based schemes and appropriately targeted interventions. We also talked about the need to ensure that value for money is a key feature of scheme development, and therefore recommendation 4, we're recommending that we maintain and develop the existing value engineering matrix as a robust tool for the prioritisation of road upgrades, maintenance and accident remediation. Recommendation 5 is that we ensure that all highways and transport changes and improvements are well publicised in conjunction with TfL, ensuring that residents are well informed and able to comment in a timely manner. Recommendation 6, we're recommending that we review the number of unadopted and private streets in the borough and, where feasible, adopt them. This is to ensure that roads benefit from the Highways Act maintenance standard, which applies to all our public highways. As a matter of policy, to adopt all new roads in development sites, except where layout restrictions dictate otherwise. Recommendation 7, we're recommending that we encourage the increased use of road safety officers and support schools wishing to initiate crossing patrols. Recommendation 8, we're encouraging school street schemes with the support of stakeholders. So again, the emphasis on consultation. Recommendation 9 is to work with the borough's planning department to lobby TfL to maximise public transport availability for new developments that reflect the needs of communities of interest and association, identified by, for example, gender, race, age and economic well-being, so that there are strong links to bus and rail networks with easy and safe routes for pedestrians. Recommendation 10 is to expand the electrical vehicle charging points offer across the borough, exploring external funding opportunities and providing a dedicated budget to advance the rollout. We're now moving into areas where we are addressing the climate change emergency, and we very much saw the shift from petrol and diesel vehicles to electrical vehicles as
Martin, sorry to interrupt. Councillor Clark, you've asked a question. You're saying that the sorry, members, that the presentation is overtly political. I have to disagree. Councillor Sachs is going through the recommendations presented by Task and Finish, which includes members from both parties. To me, it does not sound overtly political. TfL is a partner. Excuse me, I'm speaking. I will allow you to respond in a moment. TfL is a partner that obviously we work with as a council. So I will allow your question now, but I want to allow the presentation to continue because I don't see it as a political presentation. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I wanted to know what I wanted to ask before we continue. Is there a legal officer present who can also judge this? I've just found one of my colleagues who seems to think it is, in parts, not all of it. But is there a legal officer here that can give advice?
Jilly.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in response to Councillor Clark, Pravinda Sadhu is on the call at the moment. She's just taking an urgent phone call, so hopefully she'll be able to respond at some point.
Okay, well, I want to reserve my right to challenge this. Okay.
Okay, Jilly, do we hold, or do we for Pravinda to comment, or do we allow Councillor Sachs to continue?
It's at your discretion, Chair, in terms of allowing Councillor Sachs to continue and take a view.
Well,
Sorry, Councillor here.
Thank you.
I'm on the call now. Sorry about that.
I don't know if you've seen the chat. Have you heard the question? I allowed Councillor Clark to ask the question again. I don't want to paraphrase her question.
Yeah, in a couple of points, Councillor Sachs mentions Mayor Sadiq Khan and his objectives, and twice it's come up. And I'm wondering if this type of presentation is permitted during PERDA. I thought I was under the impression that we weren't allowed to discuss anything like this, anyone's objectives, be it the government's or the Mayor of London. So I don't know if you were listening to his comments. I don't have a problem with most of the presentation, but there was a couple of times, and I thought we weren't allowed to do anything anywhere near like this during PERDA.
I've missed the comments, Councillor. However, I would say that if it's factually based, then I don't see why there would be a particular issue with it.
And you're saying it's legally okay for this to go ahead in this presentation with the comments?
I don't know how much of the presentation is now left.
I'm about halfway through. Yeah.
Chair, the decision is with you, but if it's a factual matter, then clearly
I believe it is. I take your comments, Councillor Clark, but I believe it is. So I would want Councillor Sachs to continue. Councillor Patel, do you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. With all due respect, and in my humble opinion, what I see happening this evening is Councillor Sachs more or less reading from the report the recommendations. It's in the public domain. It's common knowledge now. I don't see how the PERDA would affect the situation. In the current situation where Martin Sachs or Councillor Sachs is just reading the recommendations, really, Chair.
I agree. I'm going to allow Councillor Sachs to continue. If that's so, Councillor Sachs.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to comment that, as has already been said, not least by myself, this was a task and finish group comprising members from both parties on the council, and all of the recommendations were agreed by all of the members. So I'm certainly not trying to push any political agenda. My reference to the Mayor of London was simply in relation to the fact that TfL has provided most of the capital funding for the work that is done, and we're hoping that that will continue, whatever the result on Thursday. So I will continue on my points about electric vehicle charging points. Simply to say that the move from petrol and diesel vehicles to electric vehicles is part of the climate change agenda, which our transport and highways policy must be a major part of. Recommendation 11, to continue to expand the cycling network and related infrastructure across the borough and to improve and maintain the existing network to the highest standards. And I think that's consistent with a lot of matters that have been discussed recently in the Place Scrutiny Committee. Recommendation 12 is to continue to develop and implement low emission zones borough-wide through LIP funding and internal capital. In doing so, actively work and consult with local residents and other stakeholders in developing schemes that improve air quality and promote healthy travel while minimising wider impacts. We talked about asset management. The fact that we have a 535 kilometre network of public roads in the borough. It's an asset that's valued at somewhere between 450 and 500 million pounds, and we're not really spending the sort of money, despite the big programme this year, particularly on carriageways. We're not spending really what we need to maintain that asset in prime condition, and the recommendation says to sustain and accelerate the council's commitment to eliminating the highways maintenance backlog by the earliest possible date, and to ensure regular briefings for members and relevant information for the public. So we are saying the council needs to continually focus on that maintenance backlog and continue to find funding to deal with it, so that our residents will have the benefit of a properly maintained network. Recommendation 14 is to ensure that the council declares a commitment to long-term programme of maintenance to footways, footpaths and cycleways. It is very important that we address all of our highway infrastructure, not just that part of it that is used by motor vehicles. Recommendation 15 picks up the need for a sustainable transport strategy. So we're asking that all targets that we set in sustainable transport are what we call SMART, which is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely. To publicise the benefits arising from modal shifts, e.g. improved public health outcomes from increased active transport, and to ensure that the sustainable transport strategy reflects the urgency and scale of the climate emergency. Recommendation 16 is to ensure that residents are consulted as an active partner in developing the overall strategy and in specific schemes from inception through delivery and into post implementation. And I would just make a comment because I don't think we can ignore it. I did say in my speech to the council on the issue of quiet streets, as the one of the Barkingside members, which was affected by one of the quiet street schemes, we did get it wrong, and we must never again start implementing a scheme before consulting with neighbours, and that is one of the principles that runs right through this report. Recommendation 17 is to ensure that when capital costs for schemes are improved for implementation, ongoing costs should also be approved and put into revenue budgets, because there's nothing worse than completing a capital scheme and then not maintaining it properly from day one. So that's something that that's a nettle that we must grasp and do that going forward. Recommendation 18, to explore ways of educating cyclists about proper usage of highways, cycleways and walkways. Recommendation 19, to raise the profile of all relevant issues and lobby competent agencies and authorities to bring about public positive policy changes relating to transport. So that's really making sure that our commitment to sustainability lies behind the development and implementation of the schemes that we put in. Recommendation 20, this is to consider participating in the National Highways and Transport Network Public Satisfaction Service, subject to funding being available. And obviously I've just been railing about the necessity to put every pound and penny that we can find into our footway, carriageway, cycleway network, keeping those properly maintained. And I think there's a keenness amongst our officers to make sure we do that, and not to use our resources participating in countrywide schemes. But I think we should consider doing this. What this is about is measuring public satisfaction with our transport infrastructure, with our transport schemes, with our transport networks on an annual basis. And obviously, because this is done in boroughs and counties up and down the country, to compare the results with what's happening in other places, that may give us an opportunity to go about things that we're doing well and our public like. It might also give us the opportunity to visit other authorities and learn about things that maybe we've been not doing so well in, and make improvements locally. That's something that we would like the council to consider. Okay, so our concluding statement, we wanted to place on record our appreciation of the work that officers continue to do in ensuring the local highways and transportation is kept to a high standard. And also, we wanted to offer to act as a sounding board for officers developing the sustainable transport strategy. Now, I know that the whole point of a task and finish group is that it does finish. And obviously, I know that we've kept going for 2 years on a 1-year study, and obviously that was because of COVID. But as I say, as individual members, we perhaps developed an interest and an affinity for the subject, and would like to help our officers do that work. So that concludes my presentation.
Thanks very much, Martin. Thank you for the presentation tonight. So I've got a few hands up. So I'll take Councillor Mrs. Ryan first, then Councillor Anne Sachs, and then Councillor Sherwood Patel. Councillor Mrs. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Am I unmuted or muted?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want to press.
You're now muted.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank Martin and the officers. I mean, we had a very thorough lot of meetings. I think we had 8 or 9. Certainly, some of us were 100% attendance. We didn't always agree with everything, but we usually managed to reach a happy compromise, and Martin was very fair in his dealing with us. And one of the most important things I think that came out of it was lessons that had to be learned, and that we didn't look, when we were looking at any scheme, no matter what it was, you didn't just look at the local area. You had to take far more consideration into what the impact was on areas around it and how things would be impacted there. And we found that was very, very important, and, you know, that needed to be looked at far more closely. As I said, we didn't always agree on, I mean, some people are absolutely fanatical cyclists. Some people think that a lot more rules should be, yeah, divided in 4. Should be, there should be a lot more rules. But basically, I think it was a working party that worked very well together. and I think Martin chaired it very well and was very fair to everyone. And I was grateful to the officers. I'd certainly wish we had money for footpaths. I mean, because footpath 34 is in a dreadful state, and yet that's the main one for going across, you know, the fields to Fairlock Waters. Well used, even more so now. But I'm grateful. I think we learned a lot, and hopefully a lot of the things that we need to do can be done with all in the right way and the proper consultation and everything done in the right place. And thank you, Martin. Thank you, Councillor Hare.
Thank you, Mrs. Ryan. Councillor Anne Sachs.
Thank you for your presentation, Councillor M. Sachs. Looking ahead, you may be aware that next year the government's going to review the position on electric scooters. And I note in your presentation that you favoured electric vehicles and bicycles. What room do you see for incorporating electric scooters into our lower energy travel plan?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Sachs. To be honest, we didn't spend an awful lot of time discussing that at the Task and Finish group, and maybe Steve Gray could comment on that if his department has been doing some work on it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The answer is that it's still an option that we're considering, depending on legislation changes and what that allows. We know there's trials that have taken place, and obviously at the moment there's restrictions on where they can be used and how they can be used, and it's something we would always consider as and when something changes and that there's options and there's funding made available. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, okay, Anne. Thanks, Steve. Councillor Sherwood Patel.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking Councillor Sachs as the chair and all of the members involved from both sides who've invested a great deal of time, energy and effort in, obviously, and officers, of course, putting this report together. It's an invaluable report, a much needed one. I know it's taken a long time, but it's really been well worth the wait. And thank you for the recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of the recommendations, but just a couple of recommendations I wanted to pick out, which stood out to me. Actually, the first one, if I may, where it talks about promote development of green infrastructure, pocket parks, etc. I wonder also if this is a good opportunity, because with it being in the same sort of remit, in the same area, whether there's a role for planning actually to be involved in this as well, in terms of when you're talking about concreting and greening and whatever, you know. I think more emphasis needs to be put on planning, in the sense where new developments are going ahead. We need to somehow ensure that the developers actually do follow through with the promises that they make in terms of vegetation, greening the area, etc. And I wonder, you know, if we can actually put more emphasis and look into this, where an officer can partially dedicate, I know resources is very limited, but some of their time and effort in ensuring that those promises are upheld, and not only upheld, but actually sustained on a long-term basis, because that would go a long way in so much as helping the environment with cleaner air and that sort of thing. And secondly, if I can pick on, I think it was recommendation 17, where you talk about the borough's asset, quite rightly so, approximately £500 million worth of asset, which we need to uphold and maintain. Again, I'm just wondering whether it's an opportunity where interest rates are low, borrowing's low, and reactive maintenance, of course, it's always going to be required, but whether more emphasis needs to be put on more proactive work, in the sense that if there's an opportunity for capital, for borrowing, you know, more capital in investing in resurfacing carriageways, etc., And I tell you why. I mean, there's two reasons for me saying this. One is obviously I feel that it would make travelling more efficient because if our carriageways and roads are obviously pristine, I'm suspecting there'd be less congestion and less traffic, hopefully, which would mean in turn less pollution. And also, I think it would mean fewer complaints and also, more importantly, probably less injuries and less claims. You know, people claiming from the council for trips and hazards and cracked alloy wheels, etc. So just a couple of points that I thought worth mentioning. Thank you again, everyone, for your input for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. I'll take Councillor Donovan, and then will anyone want to respond to those questions? Councillor Donovan.
Yeah, just I mean, I think with the report there that we've got it's very comprehensive and it covers all the bases, really, all the different elements. But I mean, I just hope that the report is acted upon. It's not just a report that's like we've done that, we'll put that on the shelf with the other reports. Yeah, it needs to happen, and we need to have a commitment to it, and we need to fund it. Most importantly, we need to have funding for all these things, because one of the frustrations is sometimes we seem to talk about various transport schemes, and then you suddenly find the funding's gone or it's not available, and it sort of undermines the whole thing. So I mean, I think we need the vision. I think the report gives a vision for what we need to do as for an integrated transport system across the borough, and we've now got to deliver it. And we've got to get the funding. Obviously, the funding has to be there, but we've also got to have the commitment. Because I mean, we can't just keep writing reports, having meetings, and then things not happening. We've really got to give it a bit of a priority.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. There's any other members or any officers, or Martin, do you want to come back on any of the points or questions raised?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say very briefly. I mean, I think I agree with everything that's just been said. I mean, particularly the point that Councillor Patel made about the fact that actually, with interest relatively low, now is a great time to invest in our infrastructure. I mean, our job as a task and finish group is basically to look at the policy themes and come up with the recommendations. It's the job of the cabinet to make it happen. And if you ask me to present this report to the cabinet, I'll certainly make sure the case for that is strongly argued. And I think Councillor Donovan's point about it being done holistically and basically not forgetting some of the, I mean, there are a number of humdinger recommendations in there, but we need to actually look at all 20 of them and not forget about the less noisy ones.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Joe Blackman.
Thanks. Yeah. I just wanted to add briefly that really grateful for the work of the Task and Finish group and Councillor Sachs for all his work chairing it. There's a lot of really useful stuff in there, and I think it's kind of well timed in that we are starting now to consider a sustainable transport strategy, and there's a lot of really useful themes and issues that are picked up here that we're likely to definitely consider when we move forward with that strategy. On the point about funding, we as a council we are spending our own capital as well on some of this work. And we're just about to take capital report on highways through to cabinet in the next couple of weeks, which sets out what we're doing from our own funds as well as what we're hoping to do from TfL funds. As you might be aware, we are in again another difficult situation with TfL where they're waiting for Department of Transport to agree their funding settlement. So again, we're waiting, as I understand we did last year, to find out what money might be forthcoming. And there's no getting around the fact we are reliant on that for a lot of our a lot of this work to go forward, really. And that's just the reality of the funding situation we're in. But yeah, overall really positive about the elements in this report, and really grateful for all the contributions received through it.
Thank you, Councillor Blackman. Any other members?
Whether Steve might want to add something on to what I've just said.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Steve, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Actually, I was just really going to say exactly what Councillor Blackman says there. There is my cabinet report that goes to the 18th, which actually does spell out the Highways Capital Programme for the coming year, and it picks up on a lot of the themes that the Task and Finishing Group have worked on. And as Councillor Sachs pointed out, I've actually used the Task and Finishing Group as a springboard to assist, and it's been very useful as an officer and a head of service to, get the point of view of members across all groups, and really be singing from the same sort of sheet that we're all trying to achieve a sustainable transport strategy, and that's something that I hope to use the group for going forward in the future as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask two quick questions. Recommendation 9, I think it was touched on by Councillor Shah Patel about planning, working more closely with them. In terms of transport and new developments, I have a development in my own ward, Oaklands Hamlet, and I believe they will need transport links. Can that relationship be closer with the planning? Can any work be done there? And point 20 about the National Transport and Highways Network surveys. What's the cost? Presumably there is a cost to participate. We get the information, but what's the cost and what's the advantage of participating in those surveys directly?
I haven't got the exact figure in front of me. I mean, Steve did report a figure to the meeting. I think it was in the area of £15,000. I mean, in terms of the...
Sorry, Martin, can I stop you there? Because I've set myself an alarm. If we could now break for prayers until 8:45. So sorry, I've cut you out there, Martin. So if you cannot close your computers, just you can put yourself on mute and we'll reconvene at 2:45. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
No, not Martin. Sorry, it's Joe. Did I forget to give Paul Cadell's apology for absence this evening?
No, that was done at the beginning. That's fine. I announced it. So
thank you. Because I suddenly thought, did I actually give the apology? Thank you.
He emailed me earlier, so I gave it as well separately. So that's fine. It's been given. So welcome back, everyone. Martin, I interrupted you again. I don't know if you can remember the questions. One was related to the. My screen's gone blank now. It was to do with the National Transport and Highways Network. I suppose what's the advantage of actually participating in the surveys? And the other point was related to can we work closer with the planning department in terms of transport on related to new developments. I was thinking of one particularly in my ward as an example.
Okay, I mean, I'll comment on the NHT. I think it's probably fairer that comes from myself because, as I hinted previously, I think Steve and the officers are very keen that all the money they get goes into tarmac basically and repairs, and I fully respect that point of view, bearing in mind the extent of the maintenance backlog. But if we were able to get our hands on some other resources, and that's obviously for the cabinet, the NHT would give us an opportunity through a tried and tested methodology to sample public opinion about transport services, including those provided by TfL as well as our own services, and we'd be able to compare the public perception of those year on year, and maybe identify areas where public perception is declining and enabling us to ask the question, why should that be? What can we do to improve the service and get it back on track? And also because this survey is taking place in other local authorities up and down the UK, and it would give us an opportunity to compare public perception of our services with public perception of the same services in other authorities. So it would be a third measure of how we're doing, as it were. It's what our customers think of the service. That's the advantage it would give us. I mean, I appreciate the disadvantages. It's money, which at the moment we haven't got.
Okay.
So shall I come in on the other point?
Yeah, well? Please.
And it may be, I mean, that's perhaps something Steve could comment on because it's not something that's particularly came from us as members. And I'm going to refer to a slightly oblique example, which was the work that Regeneration are doing in the Ilford Hill area and in the western gateway approach to Ilford. They've actually said we're not just going to hand these sites over to the private sector. We're going to develop a master plan for the area to ensure that there is some green space in there, both recreation space for the inhabitants of the housing developments there, and also as a major feature of the welcome to people as they enter Redbridge from the west. They'll have not just a concrete facade to look at, but some green and pleasant land, and that will be saying welcome to today's Redbridge. So I think on the grand scale, the approach that our Regeneration team are taking is splendid. If we can do that on a smaller scale, as developments are planned. I mean, that's maybe something Steve could comment on.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Did you want me to come in there on that aspect?
Yeah, if you could, just briefly.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you're all aware, my team do have an input into plan applications, especially the major ones, and also the minor ones in respect to transport and highways aspects with the development control officers. And it's something we will look for sustainable drainage systems and sustainable transport and cycling facilities, car sharing, etc. So there's all the things that we've followed up through the task and finishing group that we would try to pursue. Yes, we've been made aware of recent developments that have taken place within the town centre, for example, where there's areas that have not taken that opportunity to put additional greening and planting in, and it's something that I will be working with my colleagues from Regen and obviously from planning going forward to see if we can incorporate more of that into the developments throughout the borough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one further comment about the NHT. One of the things that we did, we were participants in the NHT national survey on highways for a number of years. And unfortunately, because of financing budgets, that we had to look at different priorities, and things did get expensive. It was between £12,000 and £15,000 a year to carry out that survey. It was a useful survey because of being able to look at comparisons, but we were only taking part with about 3 or 4 other London boroughs, and obviously it's 33 London boroughs. And from a peer point of view, we needed to look at that to compare with peers. But it was a useful survey, and it also covered things that we were not in control of. For example, with Transport for London being responsible for the bus services and for the red routes, and the Highways Agency being responsible for the M11, which are other roads within our borough. So when the sample surveys that were carried out obviously commented on a number of things that maybe we were not in control of, but it was a very useful survey, and one that if we had the funding, I would definitely promote. Thank you, Chair.
Just following on from that, I guess if there were bus routes withdrawn, just an example, if you had the survey data, then it's something you can use to, if not argue, have a conversation with TfL, I guess. Is that sort of an example of where it could come in useful?
Yeah, the satisfaction on transport and that was something we could use to refer to our third-party colleagues. It's useful for backing up and lobbying for better bus services and better improvements to transport within the borough.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Martin. Councillor Blackman, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just to what's to address the point that was made earlier about that the money's all being spent on concrete. Well, there is actually a bit of funds actually being spent on greenery as well. That I've been working to Steve with kind of reallocate from other budget lines to make sure that we are ensuring that there's real visible improvement in greenery, because of all obviously the environmental and health benefits that brings. I don't know, Steve, whether you wanted to say anything more on that point.
No, that's correct. It's all about resurfacing, and picking up on the other point about priorities with footways. We have done a lot of resurfacing over the previous three years and spending the majority of the budget on the carriageways and the road resurfacing. And it's something we'll be looking at in the future. And obviously from a sustainable point of view, yes, we are looking at some tree planting, some greening throughout the borough as part of the low emission neighbourhood project and programme. So it's not about putting in hard features, it is also on the softer measures. And as I say, we've got in the Cabinet report going forward on the 18th of May, that incorporates the detail on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. As it's getting on, I think we'll move on to the next item. But I have a couple of things. We just to all agree, members, that Councillor Martin Sachs can present this report to the Cabinet. I need to seek your agreement. So if you're all in agreement, if you just say hi or put your hands up, that'll be fine. Thank you very much. We all to note the report and the recommendations. And I just again, as already been said by many members, I just want to thank Councillor Martin Sachs and all the members of the Task and Finish, and I'll specifically mention Paul Donovan, Councillor Paul Donovan and Councillor Mrs Ryan, who are here tonight, and all the officers for their input into this excellent report. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item number 7, which is a scrutiny update, the Nature and Environment Scrutiny Task and Finish Group. So this outcome report has been deferred from this meeting until July, and we'll get that report at that meeting. I know that Councillor Donovan wishes to speak. He's a member of that Task and Finish, and you would have received an update separately in the agenda minutes. Councillor Donovan.
I think we're now due to report in July. It's just I'm a bit concerned about the delays on this, because I mean I think we started this Task and Finish actually before the Highways and Transport one, and yet we haven't yet reported. And I know there's been problems, COVID, etc. But you know, I'm a bit concerned. I'm also at the point that we made last time in the last place meeting about the need for some sort of cohesion and coordination between the whole environmental policies of the council, and we've got the recommendations and how the report of the corporate climate change panel is going to be put into practice. I think that's coming to the cabinet in July, and there's also the urban landscape report, and there's obviously the work of this nature and environment task and finish. Now, to me, they're three parts of the same thing in terms of the environment, and they must all come together, and we must get an integrated policy coming out of that. So that's why I just want to really mark it up that we've got to move on with this, and we've got to get it done, and it's got equal weight, the biodiversity side in the environmental terms, to the other two. So that's really it. I mean, if Julie wants to say anything, fine.
Thank you. Julie, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and through you, I completely take Councillor Donovan's points entirely, and I have corresponded with him and all the other members of the Task and Finish group about the resource implications within the team, which have held up this work as well as COVID. So sincere apologies to Councillor Donovan and the other Task and Finish group members, but just to give you reassurance that this work will pick up. So it is a priority, and it will be picking up, and I will be contacting members of the Task and Finish group and the cabinet members with the emerging recommendations, and to seek agreement to finalise that report for the July meeting.
Thank you. I know Edith Galliers, you're here tonight. I don't know if you wanted to add anything or comment at all.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely understand Councillor Donovan's frustrations in terms of the delays that have happened with this Task and Finish, and acknowledge that they're there. I suppose I just wanted on record that, as the last paper illustrated, with the number of scrutiny officers that supported with that Task and Finish, we have had a lot of churn within the team in the last year. There's been the pressures of the pandemic, and we've also been supporting different colleagues to get trained up. That wouldn't have happened without Gilly being in the scrutiny team and keeping that afloat, and that has had an impact. So our apologies for that. It will be here in July, and we will be bringing that in. I think Councillor Donovan's points with regards to it all being three sides of the same three-sided coin is absolutely right as well. Those draft recommendations as they came through were shared with the Climate Crisis panel and corporate panel during their work over the summer and into the autumn. And so there is references made to the work in that space as well. So in terms of liaising with Councillor Blackman, who is leading on the climate crisis work now, that is something that she's emphasised during the drafting of the action plan that will be going in July to Cabinet as well. So we are trying to bring those sides together through our officer work. So I hope that that will be seen. It's also worth saying that the climate crisis work is a starting point. It's not a final action plan, and so there's plenty of time to bring that further recommendations and that further work in as and when as we go. So I'm hoping that covers some of the apologies, but also the reassurances.
Thanks, Edith. Councillor Donovan, did you want to come back? You're on mute, Councillor Donovan.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if we're going to get back on track, I understand the problems and the difficulties there have been. Obviously, Councillor Blackman she's part of this task and finish, and she is also now the cabinet member for this area. So that should help us as well. So yeah, hopefully we can pull it all together then by July.
Thank you, Paul. Any other members? Any comments on this points? Councillor Blackman.
Yeah, not to drag the conversation out, but just to reiterate what Edith was saying, that we see them very much as a whole, really, and definitely conscious of what you were saying, Councillor Donovan, about them all being interlinked, and we need to, make sure that we're reflecting the emerging work of the Task and Finish group, which is something we've certainly tried to do through those documents, and also the Green Urban Landscape Policy, which will be really crucial as well. I know they want to make sure they're reflecting some emerging work as well. So just so we don't necessarily need sort of finished product, not to be already integrating it.
Thank you. There's no other comments from members. So this will be deferred and now be reported in July. So we'll note the update. This is a bit late because I should have done this 17 minutes ago, but I probably should have taken a roll call of all of you again after the break. Now I can see some of you on the screen, but I can't see you all. So apologies. I'm going to have to, just for the record, I'm going to just ask you again just to say you're here. So in no particular order, Councillor Shoaib Patel.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Ruth Clark.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Donovan.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sham Islam.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Syra Jamil.
Yes, present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sadiq Kothia.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Anne Sachs.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Dev Sharma. I can see you, Deb. You're on mute.
So sorry, I was on the mute.
Fine. That's fine. That's fine. Councillor
Right.
Mrs. Ryan.
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Mohammed Javed.
I'm still here, Chair.
As always. Thank you, councillors. Sorry about that. So the future meeting, the next meeting is the 1st of July. And that will be in the agenda to follow. Are there any comments on or amendments to the proposed work programme that is coming up? Does anyone have anything to add? I think we've got.
I do.
Sorry, Councillor Javed, did you want to?
I do, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, go on.
You'll see, Chair, that we got on work programme housing. There are 4 areas covered in there. I would like to see an additional one, which is the beds and sheds. If officers could touch on that. And also, if I would ask, please, I know how busy the officers are given the staffing resources and so on, but if we could bring that report forward rather than in 22, we have it in 21.
Okay, we'll take that. I'll take that offline with Jilly, and we'll come back to you. Jilly, did you have your hand up? Sorry.
Sorry, yes, Chair, I've just put it in the chat now, actually. The item from communities that was suggested, which I'd flagged up earlier to you, housing policy framework. It's due to go to Cabinet in September.
Yes.
It's being proposed for July, but obviously there may need to be a rejig of the July agenda, which is looking quite full. So perhaps you and I can have a chat outside of the meeting.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Okay, thank you, Gilly. Have we got anyone else? So I don't believe there's anyone else. Are there any urgent items? No. Motion to exclude the public. There are no items. So I can now close the meeting. Wish you all well. Good night, and stay safe, and see you soon. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.